So welcome to the Action Start Mastermind series. Today I'm sitting down with Abdulah Snobar, the Executive Director of the DMZ in Toronto. Thanks for joining us today, Abdulah.
Thank you very much for having me. Appreciate it.
So for our viewers who don't know too much about you and the DMZ, do you mind talking a little about that to start us off?
Sure. So the DMZ at Ryerson University is a technology-based incubator. It's the largest of its kind in Canada. We started about close to now 6 years ago in the hopes of really being able to help young Canadian entrepreneurs who were trying to build their dreams. For us, we look at a few things when we're bringing companies in, primarily around a problem we're solving. So there has to be some sort of social economic impact. It has to be a tech-based company. There has to be a prototype in place ready to go to market. And finally, there has to be a team that's collaborative and open to really sharing ideas and working with the community like the DMZ. We currently today have over 86 companies in the space. We have over 450 people, and it's a strong community with lots of pieces that really make it so special. So this includes over 80 mentors and advisors, 5 entrepreneurs and residents who work essentially full-time in this space to help with progress and KPIs and all the fun stuff with our entrepreneurs. But then we also have amazing initiatives like bringing in customers and investors into the space on a regular basis. So we bring in about 15 tours a week here. And that ranges anywhere from small to medium enterprise that are looking for neat solutions to implement in their business, all the way up to last week we had Prince Edward from the UK who came by just to see what was going on.
That's amazing.
And a year before that, his brother Prince Charles was here. So they just come in, they learn about all these amazing things, and they understand the beauty behind what's actually coming out of this space, but also the potential in the Canadians themselves and being able to build out their own dreams and their futures. So that's the space, and that's the DMZ as a whole. And I started here about now 4 months ago as the executive director, looking after the growth and the strategy of the organization.
So who is Abdulah?
So Abdullah is the interesting kind of story of how I got to where I am today, because you could have asked me probably 1 million times over last year or a year and a half ago, would you ever do this DMZ thing? I probably would have said no. It just wasn't in my trajectory in terms of where I was going. I started off early in my life in the Canadian military. I was an infantry soldier. Spent a few years there, and it was definitely one of the best experiences I've ever done in my entire life. Learned a lot, made some amazing friends, got the skill sets that I believe I was actually able to transfer with me over time into even this job. But after that, after my military time, I decided to go to university, and I had a passion for service more than anything else. So. And by service, I mean hospitality and tourism management, being able to work in an environment where you're always constantly helping people. So I worked at that point for, after I graduated, I worked for Fairmont Hotels and Resorts, Marriott Hotels and Resorts, and then I left all that, and at one point I started my own startup actually. It was called Social Butler. It was a group buying platform, pre-Groupon, pre-WagJag and all that stuff. But I learned quickly that I wasn't passionate about that as a business for me, kind of to continue on with my life. So I said I'm going to try something different, and I ended up coming to Ryerson to work as the manager of student relations and development in the business school at that point, where I stayed for 5 years. And during that time, I was able to build a foundation in Kenya. So I have a great passion for international development, and I was able to help support building the foundation called Supa Masai, which is a Maasai-focused not-for-profit, really focused on supporting youth and women in indigenous communities in Kenya. And that became my life for almost 3 years, and I fell head over heels over the project, and I started really making that a big focus in what I was doing. After that, I was asked to come to the DMZ to help build out the business development function. A year after that, moved into the role of ED, where it's been one of the best things I've ever done.
That's quite the variegated background.
Very much so, yeah, very much so.
What would you consider probably the most formative lessons or you learned through that, or like the hardest obstacles you had to overcome? There's so many things to pick from there.
Yeah, I think so, one of the biggest things that I always look at as being a good lesson here is that everything happens for a reason. So I have never had any regrets in my life. Even though that you've tried certain things and maybe didn't pan out the way that you thought it would pan out, it all happens for a reason. It's all going to eventually translate into why later on, possibly. And some of the biggest things I ever learned, really for me, it's about being able to keep the understanding of why you started in the back of your mind, no matter where you end up or how hard things end up getting, and making sure that there's a passion behind what you're doing. So we always call it purposeful passion, and really understanding why you're doing the things that you're doing, making sure that there's actually a love and a understanding and a belief of why you're doing it, and then obviously being able to find the right people to support you. Because I think, from military, where I started off my career, it was always about understanding buddy beside you, and making sure that you trust buddy, and that buddy can support you, and you can support him or her, and that you can actually always work together on really accomplishing whatever it is that you were set up to accomplish. And then even going into the hospitality world, it was always about building out the right team that understands the space and are loyal to what's happening and have a pride in what they're actually doing. And it translates all the way up until the DMZ. And when you get into a space like this, being able to understand that no matter what we do, it always comes down to keeping our eyes on the entrepreneur and supporting them in their adventure and their trip. And by support, it's not necessarily just being nice. It's about showing that tough love. It's about showing that need for mentorship. It's about showing the need for feedback and constructive criticism. It's about showing that need for community engagement and sharing of ideas and collaboration, and almost sometimes talking about failure as a good thing, and how do you learn from that failure as being a good stepping stone for the next venture that you want to build up as well. So it's so many things that really I got out of all these different experiences, but it was a thrill, to say the least.
Yeah, I think the big thing is you got the experience. Like, some people too often hide themselves in academics or worried about taking the risk. That's really cool.
For sure.
And you got great takeaways. Group work in a high stress situation.
Absolutely.
Arguably a fine attention to detail through hospitality. I think that's an underappreciated thing.
Yeah.
Oftentimes I speak with people relatively new to the startup scene, or just interested in, or they're just getting into it. Would you care to talk about the differences between an incubator, an accelerator, and a RIC for people who are familiar with them?
Maybe I'll explain it in the way of the Canadian context. I
Sure.
think even incubators and accelerators are defined very differently in different environments. But if I can look at incubator and accelerator first, for how we explain it here within the DMZ, an incubator is really a space for people looking to come in and acquire their first customer, that looking for validation around what they're actually doing, being able to attract some potential investors down the road, but they're really focusing on building out and refining their products and what they're trying to do. In terms of an accelerator, it's a program, and it's typically a cohort program that you go in for 4 months, sometimes 6 months, and you're really working on building out focusing on hyper growth and really focusing on getting your product to market very, very quickly, and being able to attract a number of rounds of funding possibly while you're actually in the space. And that really helps us translate back into what a RIC is versus a CLA in Canada. So RIC is a Regional Innovation Center, which we have in Toronto. We have Mars. In Waterloo, we have Communitech. And these are centers that are typically focused around supporting anyone and everyone. So if I'm a person with a technology-based business that wants to kind of get some support and help early on, I can go into a RIC. If I'm a person who's further ahead, who I've closed off already a couple rounds of funding and I'm trying to get to the next level, I can go to a RIC. A CLA is a campus-led accelerator, which is really focused around supporting universities and academic institutions and kind of developing their spaces. But for us, we're actually a bit more exclusive. So we can't just take anyone and everyone, because number one, our resources are much more limited. But at the same time, we have our specific programming in place that we know we can deliver on, and we can support people in a way that they can actually hopefully expedite their growth. And that's the idea behind spaces like incubators and accelerators. It's to bridge the gap between, it's not bridging, it's just getting out of a basement and putting you into a community that you can actually learn from, the peer-to-peer component, engage with the community at large, attend workshops, being able to attend seminars that will help you as a company founder get to the next stage, or just being able to have access to customers and investors that you wouldn't be able to do otherwise. So, and typically they have, there's a strong community and a network that people can tap into when the time is right.
Well, that's great. Hopefully people take advantage of that information. Don't go to the wrong one too early.
Yeah, for sure.
The Toronto ecosystem has grown a lot in the last couple of years. What do you believe to be the cause of this?
Yeah, it's interesting because as you say that, when I was working in the business school just a few years ago, it was working in startups was actually looked at as a second option. If I couldn't get a job in the corporate world, I'd embarrassingly have to go and try to find a job with a startup and be quiet about it because it was just kind of embarrassing to be doing so. It's changed quite a bit, and the shift in terms of talent going to startups now has been felt by Bay Street, and it's been felt by the Fortune 500 companies, and we're hearing quite a bit about it too because we run 15 tours a week here, and we brought in every CEO from every major company in Toronto now into the space, and every time they come in here they're blown away and they say, we love you but we hate you. And we love you because of what you're doing, and this is amazing work, and we had no idea this is happening, but we hate you for making our lives much harder in terms of bringing on the good talent.
That means you're causing appropriate trouble.
It's definitely a bit of disruption in the HR world, if you will, which is great, and it's something that the beauty behind why I feel that's actually been able to grow. Number one, I think people are becoming much more aware of what's happening in terms of our neighbors down south and the potential behind being able to take your dreams and your own future in your own hands rather than relying on people. The other part, I believe, it's the ability to experience something very special. Being able to get into something that you're actually passionate about and not only focus on one stream, rather do a bit of everything while you're in that organization and grow it from 0 to 100, really. And it's being able to have that pride in building it all out from inception to wherever it may end up going. And I think really the other part is it's a generation in a difference in generations and the millennials and how they're thinking and behavior of work and everything else that I come into work sometimes early in the morning, and as I'm coming in people are leaving. So people don't want to be consumed, they don't want to be told what the expectations are. They don't want to be told that you are here from 9 to 5 or that you are here from 8 to 4, whatever it is. They want to come in when they want to come in. They want to manage their own timing. They want to be able to deliver the great things that they believe in. And they don't want to have their creativity and their ability to try different things constrained by policies and governance and and rules and red tape and everything else. People want to be free, but the freedom sometimes, as we've seen, allows for amazing things to happen. And being within an organization sometimes doesn't actually allow that to kind of prosper and develop. So that's part of the reason why I see a lot more popularity happening amongst the startup scene in Toronto. And obviously it goes without saying, we have quite the talent here. And people are now starting to understand this space a lot more, and they're starting to open up a lot more spaces to allow for this to kind of play out. And it's almost becoming normalized. Like this is an occupation now. People, my kids might end up growing up saying one day, I want to grow up to be an entrepreneur. No longer to be a doctor or fireman and this and that. No, I want to grow up to be an entrepreneur. Whatever that means, but that's the thing that we might actually start hearing as a possible occupation moving forward. So
that would be a great normative thing to
yeah,
happen.
I agree.
Some people may argue by just the sheer numbers of this has come into effect in Toronto versus the different evolution in other communities like KW or once upon a time Ottawa. How would you respond to those statements? Do you think that's true, false?
The sheer numbers of
people in Toronto, like the growth of Toronto-based ecosystems is greatly influenced by the density.
Well, numbers is one thing, but really I think a lot of it too is the diversity of the population.
Okay.
I think that plays a huge factor for us, and people coming into Toronto are hungry. There is a hunger for what they're actually trying to accomplish here, but then there's also community and there's culture in terms of really people wanting to be able to try new things and try more things, and it's not numbers could always play a role into it all, but I won't call it the end all be all of things. It definitely is not. It's not just that. The DMZ and Toronto and even the entrepreneurs in the space here have done some really phenomenal things, and they've really built out some very useful technologies that are actually that are applicable across many different industries. So it's the talent behind the people. It's the proximity to where we are as well in terms of being able to connect back to our partners down south and going abroad and going global. These are all things that kind of lead into the success of the space and what's happening here. Location is one, but it's not, or the size of the people is one, but it can't be everything. There's many other ingredients that really contribute to successful ecosystems and environments.
Toronto, like that of New York, are traditionally considered financial hubs. Do you think there's this trend of them transforming into entrepreneurial hotbeds? Is something that we'll see continue, or?
Yeah, I think this is a changing time, and I tell you something, it's worrying a lot of people because it's obviously it's different, and in a good way for us, it's actually going to be changing the landscape on all fronts. It's becoming a shift in thinking. It's becoming a shift in behavior. It's becoming a shift in doing. Just looking at it from a university perspective. it's disrupting the entire educational kind of structure. No longer are universities looking at delivering lectures by me talking to you and 50 other people like you. It's now all around looking at experiential learning. How do you get people to engage and interact and do, rather than just listen and read and then be examined on that part? So it really is changing the landscape of the financial market, and Canada being strong on the financial side of things. Fintech is going to become a disruptive environment for many of the banks, and they're going to have to be able to keep up, or obviously or not, or just fall behind in terms of market share, and that's really going to be a huge factor in this kind of stuff. But I look at it as being an optimistic thing. I look at it as being a very good thing, looking into the future, as we start noticing the marketplace being challenged, and really giving people an opportunity to take away some of the monopolies, and really focus more on actually saying there's better ways of doing this, cheaper, faster, easier, and obviously more efficient. So we're gonna challenge you and actually see and let you have a run for your money here. So
at the end of the day, if you're creating value, it's hard to argue.
That's it. Yeah. So
like, there's a lot of talk about creating a super cluster and connecting using the 401 as an innovation corridor. Do you think this is something we're going to see in the near future? What are the necessary steps to get this going, and how?
Yeah, well, I do see this as being a step coming, much closer in the near future. Number one, I'm excited to see where the new government goes with all this stuff, because obviously this is an extremely part of really building Canada to become a powerhouse of a country, especially with a small market. But in particular, one way that we have to look at it right now, if we want to see this stuff happening, if we want to see us being a big cluster and really developing the strongest and best tech communities, Canada in itself has to act as a team. And I say this very genuinely, because we cannot go out there competing with each other. Toronto cannot be competing with KUW, cannot be competing with Montreal, cannot be competing with Vancouver. We're not large enough to be competing in a sense, against each other. Really what we should be focusing on is how do we come together as a cluster, supporting one another. And obviously there's always going to be the friendly competition, and that goes without saying, but realistically speaking, how do we all create this one voice to really strengthen our mark within the community and what's happening, and turning all these different heads and turning all these different eyeballs and saying, wow, what's happening up there is really something special. It's really amazing. And in a short time, we've done so much, and people are paying a lot more attention to Canada in this regard. We have a long ways to go, but it's been great progress, to say the least. So I think it's about coming together really as a united kind of front, and saying this is really important for us, for Canada, for the future, for the generation, and really for making and building out economic and social impact.
So the DMZ has worked with a lot of companies over the past couple of years. Are there a couple common traits that are inherent in successful startups?
Yeah, resilience is definitely one for sure. Being relentless is huge for us as well. Some of our biggest startups actually were created based on failures. So, Soapbox being one. It's an innovation management tool that was built based on two companies in the DMZ failing, and then them finding each other and getting along because they're extremely talented, very open in sharing their ideas, and very collaborative. Said, well, you guys had this and we had this, why don't we come together and build something really special? And they become one of the biggest DMZ alumni kind of graduates at this point. But resilience in terms of being able to just kind of continue on even in the hardest of times. Relentless in terms of being able to take on the failure, learn from the experiences, and then drive it forward. And there's the passion behind every single company that comes in the space. When we're sitting down and we're evaluating the people that are coming here, we're looking at passion. Is this a money thing for them, or is this really about having actual impact? And one thing has to come before the other in some sense. And passion can lead into many different things, but the overall kind of idea of being able to say, I will live this thing, I will breathe this thing, I will sleep this thing. That's one thing that you can't take away from an entrepreneur in a space like the DMZ, where there's been a lot of commonalities in this area.
The obverse of that is, what are some common traits that lead to failure within startups?
Not having the right team, first and foremost. I would say that right off the bat. It's not having the right people in place, and looking at things in a different light. Sometimes we forget that it's not about an individual that can make the market, that can really change things around. It's about a team of people that can come together, and it's about finding the right people as well. And it takes time, and it takes a lot of time in doing so. The other parts of the failure, I would say as well, is actually just around um, not understanding why you started. So sometimes people get into something with an intention and a motive, but then eventually they end up saying, okay, we're gonna do, instead of this one thing, we're gonna try to solve all these things, and they forget why they started. They forget the reason why, what they're trying to do, and now they're trying to become everything to everyone, and that's a huge problem sometimes with some of the startups in the space. But more importantly, I think it's just coming back now to the passion, so.
Yeah, I think passion's super important. Do you think there's a lot of schools or colleges, universities, whatever, concentrate a lot on technical abilities? Do you think there's an optimal ratio of technical skills to passion and at least resilience, relentlessness?
Yeah, there has to be. I think we're shifting, I believe, and I think universities are now becoming much more open to bringing on opportunities that will allow students to have an experience beyond just beyond the technical piece. Ryerson in itself, we're not trying to create, we have 40,000 students at the university. The last thing we want to do is create 40,000 entrepreneurs right now. But it's about how to get people thinking differently, how to get people to think creatively, so that when you have 2,000 engineers graduating a year, they're not all the exact same thing. It's about how do you get that idea, how do you drive that passion into them to start thinking in a way that they would have never imagined otherwise. And you do that through obviously experiential learning opportunities. You do it through things like conferences and competitions that really drive them to think differently. You do that through experiences on an international level to get them to start going and working with other cultures and communities. So these are all areas that really, it's changing, it's shifting, but it's important for sure.
That's fantastic. I was wondering if you could comment a little bit on this. This is can you create an entrepreneur, or do you inherently have to be one and then it just grows from there?
That's a great question. I think it's a tough one to answer.
I realize it's a little more philosophical. But
it is a bit, yeah. I think for me, it depends. I'm convinced that almost every single person in the world has a bit of entrepreneurship ingrained in them, and it's when you think about how you define it, obviously there's levels to it,
mm-hmm.
but really, I can tell you right now, when I was a kid, I was selling, the common thing of selling lemonade. There's a bit of entrepreneurship in there, because it's about how you set up, how you sold it, how much you put in, what you were putting out there, how you talked to people when they came to buy it from you. There's an element of entrepreneurship in there that everybody almost had in their time, and it depends where we are as well, because I can actually argue that entrepreneurship sometimes happens based on necessity. So I spent a lot of time in Kenya,
mm-hmm.
and I spent most of my time in Kenya was actually in the villages. So I live with the Kenyans in areas where no access to water, no access to electricity, no bathrooms, no washrooms, none of that kind of stuff. So innovation and entrepreneurship really came out of necessity, because there was no other way of doing things. So people were selling things, and people were bartering things, and people were really making things happen that you just look at it like, wow, this is incredible. They were creating their own marketplaces. But at the same time, they were also building things for their own personal use that was innovation beyond what we can ever imagine, just on how you use things to really get by day to day. So, I would say that there's a difference. There's definitely a way that, people are not always just born into becoming an entrepreneur. There's a way to learn it out of necessity, but sometimes what the difference here is how far you'll take it. How far you'll take it is really it's going to depend on the person themselves. And sometimes you're born with that, and you're not born with that. So.
And if you get the right mentors and the right surrounding community, I think also really helps amplify that.
I agree with you, absolutely. And for us, even here at the DMZ, mentorship is absolutely it's key. The minute company is admitted into the DMZ, first thing we do is we pair them up with a mentor.
Nice.
And the mentor meets with them on a regular basis, on a weekly basis, and that's just one way. But then these companies also have access at any given time to 80 other mentors and advisors within the DMZ. And these are typically experts in specific areas. And we do a lot of pitch training in the space as well to make sure that people are saying the right things, delivering the right things. And we're hard on them. It's not meant to be easy here. It's not meant to be a ride. It's not meant to say, we're not meant to bring companies in here for 4 to 6 months to a year sometimes and say, great job, great job, great job, without them hearing the hard part. Yeah, you can't. And I think that's honestly, and I know, this is sometimes the problem with Canada, is that we're too nice, and it's almost hindrance. It's a hindrance on their growth and how far they'll go, because you're in this illusion that you're always, I'm the best. I've been told I was the best, but then realistically speaking, now when you're competing on a global marketplace, and the people that are leading the way are the ones that got the hard time. They got told that their ideas are not the best. They have to change it here, and they have to improve there, and they have to push there, and they have to push there. And they cried and they sweat and they cried and they sweat, and then they came back and now they're building another product. That's sometimes going to lead you to being able to understand how to lead a successful operation as well. So,
as you mentioned, you're just starting off at the DMZ. What are your plans in the next year for the DMZ in 5 to 20 years? What would you like to see happen?
well, for us, I think it's really about focusing on the space itself in terms of building out a community that's going to be much stronger, much more relevant to entrepreneurs. We are now, from a position perspective, we're going to be bringing on our first ever director of startup services, where we're looking at having this individual become the connector between the community in terms of mentors and advisors and investors and alumni back into the DMZ. And that's hopefully going to help us grow out to become a much more effective incubator for our startups. But we're also looking at right now building out our international focus. As we grow, obviously, we understand that Toronto and the DMZ in itself cannot become a single marketplace for our entrepreneurs. And we also believe that that entrepreneurship has no borders really. At the end of the day, you go where you need to go because the marketplace there's a demand for it, and if you see the opportunity, you have to follow the opportunity. So, DMZ in itself has really been able to kind of build out the many multiple valuable partnerships where we're able to kind of work with for-profits and not-for-profits alike in different countries to provide opportunities for us to understand better what's happening, what the market's looking for, or what the needs are, what's and how we can get our companies to possibly expand out into these different marketplaces. But we are now getting to a stage where our companies are much further ahead than they were 5 years ago. 5 years ago, we were willing to take anyone and everybody to come join the DMZ. Because at that point, even the ecosystem in Toronto was quite young. Mm-hmm. People said, I have an idea. We're like, great, come on in, join the DMZ, let's see what we can do. Now we're getting applicants, at least 10 applications a week. And we're seeing these people who are all building other companies. I have a lot of respect for entrepreneurs, by the way, because even the ones here are fathers, mothers, and these are people that are working away every single day to make sure that they can have food on the table the next morning. So for them to come into this space, we're seeing quite a bit of impact, and for them to apply 10 a week, and you're like, wow, there's this much demand. So we're bringing our standards up in terms of saying, who do we admit to the DMZ, and it's okay to say no to specific people, because it wouldn't be fair to bring companies into the DMZ and have them spend their time and for sure that what they're doing is not the right way. So instead of saying, yes, we say no, but we think you should be able to go into these areas to get your ideas refined or get your businesses refined. And then in turn, what we do is we bring on companies that we see high potential in actually getting to the next phase, and we help them in every way we possibly can. But we also urge everyone else in the space to help them whatever way they possibly can.
I think it's balancing, like what you said, don't coddle them with realism and wanting the regional ecosystem to succeed, right?
You're right. You're absolutely right, yeah. So that's that it's a change in landscape for us, but we see so much potential behind it. And you almost got to ask your question. Like people say, at what point do you start saying no? Number one, when the reputation of the space starts to go down, and through that, your best entrepreneurs start to leave you for the wrong reasons. So then you got to sit back and say, okay, well, what we're doing then, we got to change our ways. We got to start making sure that we become more relevant to what's happening in the marketplace today, and this is changing. Toronto's not used to this. This has never happened to us before. So what's going on in terms of this ecosystem, this community of building up across the entire city and across the country, actually, it's new. So it's new in its way because of technology being implemented into it all, because of the young generation that's being more engaged with it all. So it's interesting from that perspective, which we're all excited to kind of see where it's going to go.
Stepping back to take a look at that from a national perspective,
sure.
Where do you think we can really take Canada to the next level as a startup beacon rather than just a follower? What do you think we need to do? Is it public policy? Is it more funding? We raise taxes, or we?
Yeah. It's a few things, I would say. Policy is one for sure, and I think changing public policy is going to probably be a key deliverable that we have to be able to accomplish in the next few years to really make Canada a much more competitive marketplace from a startup kind of perspective. Some of our policies we haven't changed in decades that they could probably start looking at doing now. The other part is just being, not taking away our Canadian-like behaviors, but it's almost refining how we are with each other to some extent to allow for better and the likelihood of success to happen in a much more normalized way. So, we want to be more proud in what we do. We should start talking a lot more about the successes of our startups here in Canada and really pushing out the message. Our government officials should be promoting on a global scale what we're doing and how we're doing it. We should be really pushing the agenda in terms of getting our companies and providing those incentives and those grants and those opportunities for companies to go at early stages to go abroad and be able to kind of put themselves out there. We should find ways now to create the model of the give back effect, the pay it forward effect from startups that have been helped here and how they can possibly give back more to Canada and Canadian entrepreneurs to get them thinking in a much more different way. We got to start challenging ourselves. We got to start rethinking what we're doing in a whole different light. And I always bring it back to the classroom because we are a knowledge-based economy as well. We have quite a bit happening here, and there's so much going on. How do you get people in a classroom to start thinking differently? How do you get I'll tell you a great example. I had an email, which this is not a normal behavior by any means, but maybe it should be. I get an email not too long ago from a person saying, I have an idea, I want to build this business, I think it's going to solve a massive problem. I have a product in place, I already have customers, can I meet with you? I respond back saying, absolutely happy to meet and just discuss a bit further to see the fit. Person walks in the room, she's 10 years old.
That's amazing.
It's a story, it blew my mind away. She was 10 years old. And for her to come into the room, that to me is a great story to start looking at and saying, how do we get more of that happening in a country like Canada? How do you get people to look at entrepreneurship before they even have to get to university? Why is there shouldn't be a milestone in terms of, okay, university and then I can start thinking entrepreneurship. You should be thinking about it when you're 10 years old, maybe even when you're 5 years old, I don't know.
Fantastic. Thank you for joining us today, Abdulah. I really appreciate you making time.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for having me. Again. Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you.